Hey, it's Amir, and today, very much inspired by the book of the same name, we're going to be taking a look at positioning. Now, if I do my job right, by the end of the video, you'll be super clear on what positioning is, why it's important for you to do, and how you can go about doing it. So, you might have heard of product positioning or brand positioning, but the truth is that positioning isn't something that we really do to a brand or to a product. It happens in the mind of our prospect. We have such limited opportunities to make an impression on our prospects that we have to be very, very clear on what we want to mean to them. So we sort of have to take a unique slot in the mind of our prospect, so it allows them to categorize and understand what we have to offer and why it's best for them. And your prospects have an ever-increasing number of options. So this means that we have more competition and alternatives to outmaneuver. And positioning is how we go about doing this. And in a sense, the competition and alternatives can be very useful here, because depending on what they are, will help us to determine our own position. And what we're going to do is look at a few examples to highlight what I mean here. But what I really want to stress is that if you don't get your positioning right, the rest of your marketing is going to suffer. You're not going to mean anything specific without a strong position. So you risk either being invisible or irrelevant or just indistinguishable from the competition. So the good thing is that very few of your competitors are going to be doing this well, let alone doing it at all. So if you can commit to putting in the work, it's going to help you more than you can realize. So to help us understand positioning, we're going to look at a few examples. Then we're going to consider some questions that you can use to start thinking about your own position and how you can start to design something powerful. So I said that your competition and alternatives are useful when it comes to your own positioning. The keys to positioning well are knowing your ideal prospect, their needs, their problems and desires, and then understanding the landscape of alternatives and competition that your audience has to solve their problem and that you sit within. And then your job is to find gaps or holes in there and then fill them. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to look at BrewDog. The way that they position themselves is against other beer brands, and they're quite aggressive in this sense, and they have a very distinct tone with it. But it helps them to be very clear to the public as to what they stand for. Their position is all this other beer is crap, and we make the good stuff, and they're very anti-establishment with that. And this position appeals to their ideal prospect. People who care about craft ales and not mass-produced personality void beers. So BrewDog have this position because their competition exists and they're stronger for it. Another great example is McDonald's. They ran a brilliant ad for their McCafe a couple of years ago that took aim at expensive and frankly pretentious coffee joints that sold overpriced cups of coffee. By showing the absurdity of these places, which of course were exaggerated for comedic effect, they took a strong position against such places, which meant they were for people who just wanted a simple cup of coffee. And they knew, because of their research, that there was an audience who didn't want a triple shot grande latte for £7.50. So people who just wanted a simple hot cup of coffee with a bit of milk in it. And this audience insight, coupled with the knowledge of the competition and alternatives, led them to this very effective position. Now, both McDonald's and BrewDog were able to mean something specific to a specific audience because they were very aware of who the competition were and what they stood for. Now, I'm not suggesting that you look around and go after and attack your competitors. You've got to be very thoughtful and strategic. But what I am saying is that when you know the lay of the land in terms of your competition alternatives and you understand your segment of the audience, you can design a very unique and powerful and strong position. That means you're going to stand for something unique, even in a crowded category. So we're going to dive into some questions that can help you to start working on your own position soon. But I just wanted to first go a bit deeper into a great example from the book Positioning. Now, this example involves a brand called Milk Duds that are chewy caramel chocolates that come in a box. Years before they were very well established, they weren't very well known simply because the competition chocolate bar brands were vastly outspending them in advertising. So taking these brands on, these chocolate bars on directly wouldn't have been a good idea because they just couldn't afford to keep up. So what they had to do was mean something different to their buyer, which were kids. So the first step was to understand what was going on in the mind of their audience. And what they uncovered was that chocolate bars did not last long. And what I mean by that is kids were eating them very quickly. Plus, chocolate bars were getting smaller. And this led to an understanding that there was a growing dissatisfaction among chocolate bar eaters. So, knowing that the competition was chocolate bars, that they were getting smaller, that they were being eaten very quickly, and this was unsatisfying, how did Milk Duds reposition themselves? Well, they became the long-lasting alternative to chocolate bars. The fact that they were separate pieces of chocolate-covered caramel made them perfect for this. They took longer to eat, which meant the buyer got more satisfaction from this. And this was smart because they weren't competing directly against chocolate bars. They were an alternative. And positioning yourself as an alternative is a smart play because you move away from competition and stand for something different, even if you're in the same category. Okay, so this all sounds very well and good, but how do we go about positioning ourselves? Well, as we must do so often in marketing, we begin with our audience. We need to know who they are and what their needs and problems are in relation to what we do. We have to be specific about that. And then we need to look at what they're currently doing to solve their problem and understanding the range of alternatives our audience has to solve that problem. And then once we understand this, we can start looking for gaps. What's missing? Where are they dissatisfied? What could we mean to our audience that would be appealing to them? And to help us with this, we need to go further into ourselves. What attributes or qualities do we have that are unique to us that we could use? And I know I've talked a lot about products in this video so far, but the same principles hold for service businesses as well. You need to understand your customer and what the result is that they're trying to achieve. And you also need to understand how they're currently doing that, how they're currently solving that problem. But then why are they unsatisfied, or how can you get a better result? And in relation to the alternatives that your audience have, why are you still needed? And to understand that, you need to look at your skills, your attributes and your features and figure out how these could be leveraged to give you an advantage via your position. Remember, it could be something really obvious. Milk Duds were simply individual chocolates that were very chewy. So obvious, in fact, that it could easily be overlooked. So it might be worth working with someone who has objectivity that can help you to list these things that you could be somewhat blind to just because you're so close to them. And then what you want to do is take these and really understand what they mean to your audience so you can fashion your own position. Fundamentally, you have to remember that most of the people in your category won't be doing this, doing it well or doing it at all. So it's a big opportunity to outmaneuver them. And in doing so, you're going to separate yourself from the crowd of noise and give yourself a specific meaning to a specific audience, taking up a unique slot in their mind, which is only going to benefit you and your business. If you want to read further on this, I'll put a few recommendations in the notes below, but feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and thanks as ever for watching.